gonna keep running with this. So I think that sometimes some things that are absolutely confounding or enigmatic to a people or a group might not be the same to another group, and some of it is from within. It's, I want to say, some of the limitations of language, but also communing between people. It has to do with deeper levels of perception, but also maybe limitations of bias that would attend an entire group um, that collectively, because we influence one another all the time, but then also the language shared between a group that would amount to limitations within the language and what can be done and understood with that language and also expressed with that language. So like an example of that would be like if you some things you know exactly what a person means, and it's more eloquent, but you couldn't necessarily repeat that exactly, even though you can understand it coming from a different culture and background and dialect. Even you might speak the same language as someone but a different dialect. An example of that is like if someone were to say uh damn, I need me some of that right now. So you know exactly what I mean. But if you hadn't been exposed to that syntax and vernacular and grammar in your life, it would be difficult for you to express even something like that, if you hadn't been exposed to that, to know that it's a possibility to communicate like that. Or you say something like see that shit right there, that's the type of shit that make a motherfucker feel a type of way. Now, you know what I meant by that, but it somewhat would be confounding if you didn't speak like that. And I didn't mean to be vulgar by using that word, but there's actually a difference between, according to the YouTuber uh, No Breed Global Truth, there's actually a distinction between what's cussing and cursing. That is, cursing is more so a deeper level of cussing that is like to influence a person to injure themselves, to injure another person, or to influence another person to injure themselves. Something that would be calculated to that would be cursing, and it doesn't necessarily have to employ what's called profanity. But then something can also be cussing, which can be eloquent, humorous, or like employed in self-defense to an objective and a decent purpose. But it doesn't necessarily have to be cursing, but it can be cussing like that. And so, but it doesn't necessarily have to be profane or vulgar. Profane would be if it's not suited to an audience, or it's being it's not suited for an audience, or to be addressed to an audience, would be profane. And then vulgar is like when you mix things out of their context. Like if you were to put like uh if you were to put um uh peanut butter and jelly on top of a hot dog, or ketchup and mustard on top of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that's vulgar, because there's nothing bad with those things uh individually or in a context. But you mix them together and it's a little bit, it doesn't go, and that's what vulgar is. And that also be like saying something like, if you were to introduce a sexual topic at a business meeting, not that everyone at the business meeting isn't interested in sexual topics or potentially in sexuality with each other after the meeting, but in that venue, the purpose of that venue, and some of the dynamics and the rigors of that would attend that venue, to introduce a sexual topic or conversation, if it wasn't tactful or tasteful or artful, it could be vulgar in that sense. So it wasn't that there was something wrong with sexuality, but in that setting, it didn't. It's not sexy in that setting like that, unless it was like artful and skillful. But so when I was cussing like that, I wasn't trying to be either vulgar or profane or cursing, but just cussing to make a point that some of what I might have been doing there would be a distinction. So the scholar in YouTuber uh, um, uh, uh, um, Dr. Umar Johnson, he talked a little bit about some of the language patterns of people who are of African American descent, foundational Black American, but also some of the influences of Africa within the experience of African American people, that cannot, you actually can't take a people away from their language, because if you took the language away, you would take if you actually destroyed a language utterly, you would destroy the people, because the people are connected to the language and are the language. So I would say, sometimes if you think about some of the brutalities that the foundational Black American people have sustained on the United the soil the geographical region of the United States for the last several, at least 400s of years to the present day. A lot of that I've said in the same series, that some of how children may sustain some of the neglect and the abuse and the challenges and the rigors that may be undue to their station and capacity at different ages of their development, from the carelessness selfishness, or egregiousness of the people rearing them. What may help them sustain that is equally as the graces of different people that would come across their path that have their best interest, or just have a contribution that would serve their best interest. Part of it is their internal world, their experience of life through themselves and as themselves and within themselves is what's actually greater than all this that's around them. What's in the inner world is yet deeper and more profound than the outer world for a human being, but also in reality. And a conversation I had with a scholar in privacy was saying that actually what's called inner space, the inner dimensions of what we appreciate as space, may be far vaster, deeper, and more profound than what we appreciate as outer space, even as vast and diverse as outer space is. And I was saying in this series that maybe the Earth is similar, where what's on the terrestrial, the land, the outer Earth may not be as significant as what's within the earth, and the life of plants and trees might actually be deeper underneath the roots. And there may be something necessitated upon a life above earth, but the deeper life might actually be within the earth, is what I think sometimes. But what I was saying is that, like with the children surviving by their inner world when they're tasked with different hardship in the outer world, I think that the language of people is what has helped people sustain. So some of the strength and the beauty and the redemption of the foundational Black American experience may actually be within the language. Is what would help people sustain that. The art that's possible from that, but also the loving, the communing, the fellowship, and the sharing of burdens, the sharing of labors, the sharing of humor. This real struggle, the overcoming, is within the language, and you can hear that in the language a lot. But also the language has an eloquence. But according, so you can say that maybe when people were forced to undergo the rigors of slavery, they were deprived of truly enjoying and having the shelter of the languages that they came with, and the type of communication and support and fellowship that would have been facilitated by the language that they were coming with. But you can't exactly take the language away. What you can do is confuse the language. So you can say that by strategically mixing them and separating them and isolating them, the language was successfully confused, but it was not stripped, because had you stripped the language, there'd no longer be a people. And if we know anything, is that foundational Black Americans will overcome anything and make anything that they overcame better for them overcoming it. But so I want to say is that the language, the real original language, may still exist intact, though a little bit, though it's been obstructed by the different designs, such as like the atrocities of the tactics of Willie Lynch, or what was appreciated as perhaps maybe a person named Willie Lynch. But all I meant to say is that the language is still living and vital, but some things about the language, it's actually a different sense of self and other that would allow certain statements and syntax and grammar and conjugation to express ideas. So Dr. Umar Johnson has pointed out that if you look at traditionally Eurocentric language, contrasted but not isolated from what's appreciated as African foundational Black American language or employment aesthetics around language, there are some salient distinctions, even though they're combined. One is that in the Eurocentric language, there's more of an emphasis on consonants. This is according to Dr. Umar Johnson. Consonants: father, brother, sister. But in the African American, in the foundational Black American, I think, according to him, also Jesse Jackson coined the term African Americans in the 80s for political purposes that may not serve people who are foundational Black American. But according to Dr. Umar Johnson, but within the African American FBA language, you have a release or a little bit of an easiness around the consonants. So you say brother, sister, stuff like that. So that's one. But also in the Eurocentric language, there's the taking turns. One person speaks at a time, but more than one can speak at a time in the FBA language.